In the shadows of an enchanting world where ancient magic whispers and modernity intertwine, Moonbound, the Chronicles of Egan Wolfe, unfolds a riveting tale of passion, redemption, and the intricate dance between the light and darkness. Egan Wolfe, a reluctant werewolf cursed to straddle the line between man and beast, embarks on a journey fueled by the lunar-touched odyssey to reclaim his humanity. Enter Sophia, an unsuspecting woman whose life intersects with Egan's in a serendipitous encounter that alters their fates. With a heart as fierce as her spirit, Sophia becomes the key to unlocking the shackles binding Egan's lycanthropic existence, igniting a bond that defies societal norms and spans realms. The enigmatic Danu, a guardian of ancient wisdom and gatekeeper, plays a pivotal role in revealing hidden paths to Egan's liberation, threading together fragments of forgotten lore and contemporary challenges. Together they navigate through the treacherous landscape, from the dragon's lair of lost treasure to the immortal court's intervention, each step crucial in unraveling the complex web of Egan's fate. Amidst their quest, darker forces threaten to unravel the fragile balance, exposing that the true enemy resides not solely within Egan's curse but society's fear and prejudice. Moonbound delves into themes of self-acceptance and identity, illustrating that in the heart of every beast resides a soul craving to be understood and cherished. Egan Wolfe, our protagonist, embodies resilience and the struggle for redemption, illustrating that in the world divided, love transcends boundaries and can rewrite destinies. Moonbound, the Chronicles of Egan Wolfe, beckons readers on a thrilling odyssey through love's depths, exploring the timeless question of what it means to embrace one's true self in a realm of dual natures. Chapter 1. Although I had now cured myself of the werewolf curse and was intent on getting revenge on Herobrine for making me a werewolf in the first place, my plans for revenge had been put on hold for a little bit. I had intended on going home, resting for a couple of days and then setting out to get my revenge. But a couple of things got in the way. To begin with, I didn't really have a very good plan for revenge. At this point, it was just a concept. I wanted it to be something that embarrassed Herobrine, that made him look like a fool. Although the world of Minecraft would probably be better off without him in it, I wasn't planning on trying to kill Herobrine. Even if I wanted to kill him, I probably wouldn't be able to. But even if I could figure out a way to do it, it would probably come only at the cost of many lives. Knowing Herobrine, if he came under attack from me, he would immediately destroy Ranger's village in order to break my resolve. After the near destruction of Ranger's village by the pillagers, I wasn't going to risk that again. No, one-on-one, pure humiliation was the ticket. The second reason that I wasn't off getting my revenge already was that I had to supervise the reconstruction of the pillager outpost I had destroyed when I was suffering from the werewolf curse. My original reconstruction plan had been to pay a bunch of villager artisans to rebuild the outpost on their own, while I went off to get my revenge. But the artisans were so frightened of the pillagers that they wouldn't show up at the job site without me being present to act as their protector. So I had to spend all my time supervising and organizing the construction. In fact, I built a small house on a hillside near the job site so that I wouldn't have to travel back and forth every day. Here is how it all worked. Every morning, the villager artisans would arrive from nearby villages and start working. The leader of the pillagers would tell me what he needed built, and I would relay that information to the villager artisans. I had to stay on site all day long or else the villagers would run away in fear. Although I thought the villager artisans were cowards, I could see the dangerous looks in the eyes of the pillagers. They loved killing things and especially villagers. If I weren't there, things would have gone bad very quickly. About a week into the construction, a villager blacksmith approached me. "Steve, I need to talk to you." "What is it, Sebastian?" "The pillagers want me to build a giant iron rack on the 3rd floor of the outpost. I'm pretty sure they want to use it to torture any mobs or players they capture. I really don't want to build it." I rolled my eyes. "Look, Sebastian, I know pillagers are evil and mean and stupid, but this is all part of the deal I made with the pillager leader. We build what they want and my friend Ranger's village remains safe. If you don't want to build it, you can leave and I will find someone who will. But don't come back looking for work." Sebastian looked at me with anger, but then took a deep breath and sighed. "All right, I'll build it. I don't like it though. But I need the money. I've got 8 kids I have to feed." "Sorry about that," I said. "Maybe you can get the kids to do some work?" Sebastian laughed and shook his head. "Their mother is an overprotective librarian. She doesn't want them to be blacksmiths and earn an honest trade. Like their father. She wants him to be doctors and lawyers and get involved. With all that scandalous book learning. I don't know what she's thinking. I shrug. Who knows what anyone's thinking, really? Sebastian looked at me like I was a crazy person. Maybe I was. Okay, thanks anyway, Steve. I guess I'll build the torture rack they want. But I don't have to like it. Sebastian stomped away, shaking his head sadly. I sat down on a tree stump and watched the work progressing. My employees had just started building the third story of the pillager outpost. Based on the plans given to me by the leader of the pillagers, there were to be 5 stories on this outpost, a few balconies off the sides and a handful of jail cells and storage sheds on the ground. Based on our progress so far, I thought we would have the outpost completed within 1 week. And then I could get my revenge, whatever form it might take. A few minutes later, the leader of the pillagers approached me. I nodded at him and asked, "What do you want, Butch?" "I want you to add an extra story to the outpost," he said gruffly. I stood up and shook my finger at him. "We agreed to 5 stories before I started construction. I'm giving you back what you had before my werewolf self destroyed it. No more, no less." Butch pulled out his sword and started cleaning under his fingernails with its tip. "Should I just go destroy Ranger's village right now? Are you backing out of the deal?" "No, but I'm just giving you what you had," I said. "Restoring the status quo." Butch shook his head and chuckled. "I believe you said you would build it better than it had been when we were negotiating the deal. Right?" I thought back to our conversation immediately after I had broken the werewolf curse. I think I did say I was going to build the outpost bigger and better. Or something to that effect. Fine, but tell me all the improvements you want right now. No more changes. After this conversation, Butch finished cleaning under his nails and tucked his sword into his inventory. "I suppose that's fair. Okay, I want you to put a 6th story on top of the outpost. That will be my penthouse and headquarters. Entirely private. I want it to be decorated with the finest paintings and carpets. Want a hand-carved oaken bed with a double-thick mattress and wool blankets." I rolled my eyes. Typical dictator. "Anything else?" Butch nodded. "I want you to build twice as many cells for holding prisoners. Also, triple the size of the storage sheds. We're going to do a lot of raiding once this construction project is completed." "Okay, more cells, more storage space. Anything else?" Butch smiled. "Just 2 more tiny requests. A nether portal and an end portal." My mouth gaped open in shock. "You can't go into the nether or the end. That's not how Minecraft works." Butch shook his head. "I don't care what you think about how Minecraft works. You are going to build a nether portal and an end portal. How I use them is my concern." I shook my head with disgust. "Okay, I'll build them, but after that I'm done." "Got it." Butch grinned. "Nice doing business with you, Steve. I knew you'd be reasonable. Get out of my sight. I've got work to do." Chapter 2. 2 more days had passed and many of the artisans had begun work on the 5th story of the outpost. Others were working on increasing the number of cells and storage sheds on the ground near the outpost. I planned to wait until the very end of construction to build the nether and end portals. I didn't want Butch or any of his underlings using either one of them while we were still at the job site. I was sitting on my tree stump, observing my employees and eating a steak sandwich when Ranger arrived unexpectedly. "Steve, how are you?" I finished chewing the food in my mouth and swallowed. "Ranger, what are you doing out here?" Ranger walked up to the tree stump and said, "I was out hunting rabbits. When I realized where their trails had led me, I took a detour to see how the work was progressing. Looks like the outpost is nearly finished." "You'd think so, but Butch asked me to build a 6th story and also nether and end portals." Ranger raised an eyebrow. "Why does he want those portals?" "He never said explicitly, but probably so he can start pillaging those realms. Of course, he has no idea what awaits him, especially in the end. Don't think he is going to have very much success." Ranger rubbed his chin. "I hope not. If the pillagers could establish a stronghold in either of those realms, it will upset the balance of power in Minecraft. It might even start an all-out war between the realms." I nodded my head. "No one needs that." "That is for sure," said Ranger. "I remember when I was in school I read in my history books that several hundred years ago there was such a war between the realms. It lasted for nearly a decade. The mobs fought each other so fiercely that they were nearly completely decimated. Finally, once everyone realized that they were about to go extinct, they formed a truce. It hasn't broken since then. But if Butch uses these portals, it may. Maybe I shouldn't build the portals then? I said. It's up to you. Maybe he's just going to use the portals to conduct trade. Gather some chorus fruit for his pillagers to use so that they can teleport while they are raiding villages or something. I nodded my head. Could be. He did say that if I refused to build portals, he would kill everyone in your village. So I'm doing it. A serious expression darkened Ranger's face. Indeed. Thank you. Ranger then looked in the direction of the outpost. We both watched as Butch walked around, telling jokes to his underlings. Maybe Butch needs to disappear, forever. Maybe, I said. But hold off on any assassination until after I get this outpost built. After that, do whatever you want. I just don't want to have the destruction of your village on my conscience anymore. Ranger reached out and clapped my shoulder with his hand. Don't worry about. If I decide to move forward with this idea, it will take a while for me to come up with a plan. I nodded my head. Speaking of plans, I'm trying to think of a good way to get revenge on Herobrine. I want something that will humiliate him, preferably in front of as many people as possible. Do you have any ideas? Ranger thought for a few moments and said, well, Herobrine's a prankster, right? So, why not come up with some sort of prank against him, then make sure you have an audience when you prank him? I smiled at the thought. That would probably work. Do you have any prank ideas? Ranger shrugged. I don't know. Just think about what would embarrass you and then figure out a way to make it happen to Herobrine. I smirked. Interesting idea. I'll think about it. Ranger smiled and then his head darted toward the nearby forest edge. I hear some rabbits. I'm going back to my hunting. I waved at Ranger as he trotted back to the forest. Good luck. Chapter 3. I spent the next few days thinking about pranks I could pull on Herobrine. Came up with a pretty good list. The problem was I wasn't sure how I could pull any of them off. I had no idea where Herobrine lived. I had no idea what his itinerary was or where he might be at any time. The problem with pranking someone is you have to know his or her routine. For example, if you're going to prank someone you go to school with, you just have to know what classes they take and when they eat lunch. If you prank someone you work with, you have to know when they arrive at work and leave and when they leave their office for work-related duties. But Herobrine was a special case. He could be anywhere at any time. He had no set routine as far as I knew, and he didn't have any friends from whom I could try to extract helpful information. As I watched the roof go on to the 6th-story penthouse of the outpost, I had nearly given up my plans for pranking Herobrine. And if I could not prank him, how would I ever get revenge of any kind? A few hours later, I was walking around the outpost inspecting the final construction on the jail cells and storage sheds with the villager carpenter. Jacob, the structures look fine. You have done a great job. Jacob smiled and rubbed his hands together. Awesome. So are you gonna pay me now? I can't wait to get all those emeralds into my hands. I shook my head. Greedy villagers. So stereotypical. Sure. Can pay you now. But I only have diamonds on me. Do you want to exchange them for emeralds yourself, or do you want me to do it and I can pay tomorrow? Jacob looked disappointed. I prefer getting paid in emeralds, but I also want to get out of here and away from these disgusting pillagers. So I'll take the diamonds. I reached into my inventory and pulled out a large number of diamonds and handed them to Jacob. That should be enough, even if you don't get a favorable exchange rate. Jacob grinned and laughed. The joke is on you, Steve. I can get a great exchange rate. Looks like you just paid me a little bit extra. I rolled my eyes. Whatever. I'll just mine more diamonds later. No fair, whined Jacob as he stomped his foot on the ground. I wish I could go mine diamonds. I don't know why villagers aren't allowed to go mining. Doesn't make any sense. I shrugged. I don't write the rules. I just play by them. Jacob stuffed the diamonds into his inventory and then said, see you later. Hope I never have to come back to this stupid outpost ever again. And then he stormed off back to his home village. I was returning to the base of the central tower of the outpost when another villager trotted up to me. I've run out of iron ingots, he said. I need to Build a few more hinges for the doors and I don't know where to get any. All right, Reggie. I will find some for you. But it might not be until tomorrow. On the contrary, my good sir, it can be right now, said a voice behind me. From the sing-song tone and the much too happy voice, I knew there could only be one sort of person standing behind me. I turned around and beheld a wandering trader. Is that so? I asked. The wandering trader smiled. Indeed it is, he said with a bow. My name is Trader Wilhelm. I have all manner of goods with a strong bias toward construction-related items. He looked at Reggie. Did I not hear you say you needed iron ingots? Oh yes, said Reggie. I have iron ingots. Only 1 emerald each. How many do you need? I held up my hands and shook them. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I grabbed Reggie and pulled him out of earshot of the wandering trader. How many ingots do you need? Probably 100, he whispered. Okay, let me do the talking, I said. We returned to where Wilhelm stood alongside his 2 llamas. Here's the deal, I said. I need 100 iron ingots, but I am not paying 1 emerald each. What kind of deal can you offer me? Wilhelm smiled. A man of business. I like that. I'll tell you what. I'll charge you 100 emeralds for the ingots, but I'll throw in 5 roasted chickens at no additional cost. I laughed at his offer. That's the worst deal I've ever heard of. How about this? You give me 100 iron ingots and I'll give you 25 emeralds. You can keep the roasted chickens. Wilhelm looked disgusted. That is not possible. I would return home in shame. Were I to agree to such a deal, the best price I can offer is 100 ingots for 75 emeralds. I stood there, pretending like I was thinking about it. I could see Wilhelm getting more and more excited, like I was going to take his deal, which was still pretty bad. I began reaching into my inventory and then, just as Wilhelm's smile filled his entire face, I pulled my hand out. He frowned. You know, Wilhelm, that still seems a bit much. How about this? You give me 100 ingots and the 5 chickens and I will give you 50 emeralds. Wilhelm thought about it for a bit. And then he said, this is my final offer. 100 iron ingots, no chickens, and you give me 50 emeralds. That was exactly the deal I had wanted from the beginning. But I didn't want Trader Wilhelm to know that. I sighed and shook my head a little bit before kicking the ground a couple of times and scratching my hair. I put my hand on my hip and shook my head again before I looked up and said, I guess I can live with that. I don't like it, but I can live with it. Wilhelm smiled. A magnificent bargain. Allow me to retrieve the ingots. It took Wilhelm a few minutes to stack all of the ingots into a pile. I then removed 50 emeralds from my inventory and handed them to him. Reggie and a couple of helpers then took the iron ingots to where they were needed on the construction site. As Wilhelm began to wander away from the construction site, he looked at me. Again. Is there anything else you need? I have a surprising amount of goods in my llama's storage compartments. I shook my head. I think I have everything I need. I paused and then chuckled. What I really need is to know where Herobrine lives. Wilhelm stopped in his tracks. He looked at me with a sly smile. What's it worth to you? Why? And do you know where he lives? Wilhelm smiled. Of course I do. I can take you there. For a small fee. And exactly how much would that be? Tell me, is it true that you are paying for most of the construction supplies with diamonds? I squinted my eyes at Wilhelm. Yes, I said cautiously. Wilhelm smiled. Excellent. I need diamonds for something else. I'll tell you what. You give me 100 diamonds and I'll take you to Herobrine's house. 100 diamonds. I could practically build a second outpost without much. Wilhelm shrugged. It is no matter to me. I already know where Herobrine lives. But it is you who needs that information, no? How about 50 diamonds? I said. Wilhelm shook his head. I'll tell you what. I'll do it for 75 diamonds and 5 bushels of carrots. Where do you expect me to get carrots? I asked. Wilhelm shrugged. Plant a farm. Buy them. I don't care. 75 diamonds. And 5 bushels of carrots. That's my final offer. I threw up my hands. Okay, but I have to finish this construction. It'll probably take a few more days. What do you propose then? Asked Wilhelm. Why don't you come by my house in 1 week? I'll pay you what you ask and Then we can go to Herobrine's house. Wilhelm considered my proposal for a moment before nodding his head. Perfect. I will see you then. Just a minute. Don't you need me to show you on a map where my house is? Wilhelm smiled. No need. Everyone knows the house of Werewolf Steve. Chapter 4. A few days later, the reconstruction of the pillager outpost was completed. Butch, the pillager leader, and I walked around the structure surveying the final work. This looks a little crooked over here, he said, pointing to a stair on the staircase. I looked at it closely. It's not crooked. Maybe your eyes are crooked. Butch stiffened. How dare you insult me like that? Look at it more closely. It's obviously crooked. I was sick of Butch. Even though I still believed the stair was perfectly straight, I punched it and then rebuilt it right in front of him. Took me just a few seconds, and it was perfectly straight. Butch smiled. That looks perfect. Well, I guess that's it. Everything seems to be in order. I waited for Butch to thank me for rebuilding his outpost, but he said nothing. You're welcome, I said venomously. What? You wanted me to thank you? You're the one who destroyed my outpost in the first place, he said angrily. I crossed my arms in front of my chest. I only destroyed it because Herobrine turned me into a werewolf. Otherwise I would never have come within 500 blocks of this stink hole. How dare you call my home stink hole? If it were not for the fact that we had a deal, I would kill you right now and then I would flatten that village you are so fond of. I walked up to Butch and shook my finger in his face. If you violate our deal, you had better watch your back. Oh, I'm shaking in my boots, said Butch, making his voice high and shaky, like a scared toddler. Oh no, how will I ever protect myself? I shook my head at Butch. Are we done here? Butch nodded his head. Yes. You've done what you said you would do, and I will do what I said I would do. I promise not to attack Ranger's village. So, pillagers actually have some honor after all? How dare you insult me like that? Of course we have honor. We just tend to ignore it, said Butch. In this case, I intend to honor my honor. Derp. Fine then. I hope I never see you again, I said as I turned and walked away. I arrived back home about 2 hours later. When I opened the door to my house, I smelled that stale smell of air that hasn't moved for a couple weeks. I'd been away that long. I walked inside the house and opened all the windows to allow fresh air to flow inside my house and clear out the staleness. I knew the traitor Wilhelm would be at my house soon, so I had to arrange for the 5 bushels of carrots, the 75 diamonds I had in several chests, hidden under a trapdoor in the floor. After I relaxed for about an hour, I walked to Ranger's village. When I got there, several villagers turned their noses up at me and ignored me, still bitter about my former werewolf behavior. But several approached me and thanked me for solving the pillager problem. It's the least I could do after. What happened? I said. By the way, do you know where Farmer Jenkins is? The villager with whom I had been speaking pointed to the left and said, I think I saw him in the armory. Thanks, I said as I walked toward the armory. I punched open the door to the armory and saw a weaponsmith working on some axes. There was no one else in the room. Have you seen Farmer Jenkins? The weaponsmith looked up at me with angry eyes. He was one of the villagers, who obviously didn't like my behavior as a werewolf. Just left. Said he was going back to his farm, he said with a grunt. Thanks, I said as I left the armory. Good riddance, mumbled the weaponsmith. It was a short walk, about 5 minutes, to Farmer Jenkins' farm. He was known throughout the village for growing the best carrots and watermelons. When I got to his farm, he was out tending to his fields. Farmer Jenkins, I'm here to buy some carrots, I said. Farmer Jenkins looked over his shoulder at me. It's you. Go away. Werewolf. Come on, man. I'm not a werewolf anymore. I just want to buy 5 bushels of carrots. When he heard the size of my order, Farmer Jenkins became more receptive to my presence. Why didn't you say so? I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. How about 10 emeralds per bushel? I could buy them in the grocery store for that much. I thought you would give me a discount. Well then, buy them in the market, why don't you? He said as he turned away from me and went back to pulling weeds. How about this? I'll give you 5 emeralds per bushel and throw in a diamond for free. Farmer Jenkins stood up and turned around and faced me. I suppose that will be satisfactory. And let's add one more thing. I rolled my eyes. What is it? You promised to buy a bushel of carrots from me every month for the next year. I'll sell them to you for 5 emeralds each. I suppose that was reasonable. I did like carrots and I was planning on getting a horse. And I was pretty sure horses like carrots, right? Okay, it's a deal, I said, digging into my inventory and removing 25 emeralds and a diamond. I handed the payment to Farmer Jenkins and he said, "Follow me. I have the carrots in storage. I just harvested them yesterday." After I got the 5 bushels of carrots, I tucked them into my inventory. Was astonished at just how much would fit into my inventory. If I had to carry 5 bushels in my hands, it would be impossible. I waved goodbye to Farmer Jenkins, who turned up his nose and did not wave back, and went back to my house. When I got there, I put the carrots into a chest for safekeeping. After that, I opened my trapdoor and went down and counted my diamonds to make sure I'd have enough to pay Trader Wilhelm. I had enough and more. But after I paid Trader Wilhelm, I'd have very few diamonds left. All that work for nothing. Well, not for nothing, I mean I did pay dozens of villager artisans to build an entire outpost and save the lives of Ranger and his people, but it was sad that I had to disperse my wealth like that just because of the consequences of Herobrine's werewolf curse. Oh, I hate him so much. But, on the bright side, I was sure I could rebuild my wealth. I would just need to mine more valuable ore. When I climbed up from the room beneath my trapdoor, I reset the trapdoor and placed a carpet over it. I looked out one of my windows and noticed that the sun was beginning to set. I cooked myself a small dinner and then shut up my windows, locked my door, and went to sleep. Chapter 5. The next 2 days passed uneventfully. On the 3rd day I had just finished my lunch when there was a knock on my door. I opened the door and there stood Trader Wilhelm. "Do you have the payment?" I shook my head. "What? No, hello. I'm all business all the time." I chuckled. "Yes, I have the payment. Please get it and we can begin. All business is right." I went to retrieve the payment. I was about to open my trapdoor when I realized how stupid that would be. I returned to Trader Wilhelm and said, "You'll have to wait outside. I don't want you to see my secret hiding place." "Your wish is my command," said Trader Wilhelm, who was in the midst of a bow. When I shut the door in his face, it took me a few minutes to retrieve the diamonds and the carrots. Once I had everything, I went back to the front door and opened it. Trader Wilhelm had already opened one of the cargo bags on his llamas, waiting for the payment. "Just toss it all in there," he said. I walked up to the llama and unloaded the loot. I saw Trader Wilhelm's eyes get bigger and bigger. His greed satisfied, he said, "Shall we go?" "Just a minute. Let me make sure I haven't forgotten anything for my prank." Went inside my house and double-checked my inventory. Yes, everything is here. I mumbled to myself before going back outside. "So?" asked Trader Wilhelm. I could tell from the tone in his voice that he was becoming impatient. "All set. Let's go." We wandered in a northerly direction for the rest of the afternoon. As the sun began to set, Trader Wilhelm said, "We should make camp here for the night." "Just how long is it going to take to get to Herobrine's house?" I said, realizing I had not asked prior to that moment. "We should be there by midday tomorrow." I smiled. "Excellent. I'm just going to make a small cabin really quick." "Do you want me to make it wide enough to fit 2 beds?" Trader Wilhelm shook his head. "I prefer to sleep under the stars." "Suit yourself." The next day, Trader Wilhelm banged on the door to my small cabin at first light. As I was emerging from the disorientation of my sleep, I thought for a moment it was a zombie. "Let's eat breakfast and get going," he said. I yawned and got dressed and then pushed open the door. "What's for breakfast?" I said. "I'm going to eat some bread and roasted chicken," said Trader Wilhelm. "I don't know what you're going to eat because I don't know what kind of food you have in your inventory." "You're not going to share with me?" I asked. "There was nothing in our deal about me feeding you. Just get you to Herobrine's house. But for a small payment I'm sure I could share my breakfast." I shook my head. "You wandering traders are pathetic. No humanity at all. Always looking for a quick emerald. I've got plenty of food with me, don't worry," I said, removing a pumpkin pie and a bottle of water from my inventory. Trader Wilhelm smiled as he bit into the succulent meat of his roasted chicken leg. Trader Wilhelm's estimate for our arrival at Herobrine's house was Surprisingly accurate. We arrived just after midday, the sun just beginning its descent toward the western horizon. There it is, said Trader Wilhelm, pointing. I looked in the direction indicated by his finger and saw nothing but trees. Are you kidding me? That's a forest. Trader Wilhelm shook his head. I'm afraid you don't see the tree for the forest. If you look more closely, you'll see the outline of a wooden structure, which is the outer wall of Herobrine's compound. I focused on the forest, squinting my eyes and tilting my head in various directions. And then suddenly, the outline of the wall manifested itself in my vision. No way. That's great camouflage. Trader Wilhelm nodded his head. Indeed. Did you expect anything less from the great prankster Herobrine? But the real question for you is how you are going to get beyond that wall to Herobrine's actual dwelling. My understanding is that his house is made of stone and is quite some distance from the wall. Any ideas? I asked. Trader Willem shook his head. I have never been beyond the wall. I have traded with Herobrine once or twice in the past when I happened by and he was coming or going from a prank. But he's never invited me in and I've never asked to be invited in. Right then, I said. What are you going to do now? Trader Wilhelm smiled. I think I'll go up to that hill back yonder, he said, pointing. I want to see what you come up with. Don't you have some wandering you need to do? I said. Trader Wilhelm shrugged. Meh, I feel like watching. Unless of course you want to pay me to leave. What a greedy freak. No, you don't get any more of my money. Scram. Trader Wilhelm smiled. Chapter 6. The prank I had planned wasn't particularly elaborate, but I did want an audience for it and not just some dorky wandering trader. Critically, I would need to get beyond the wall to Herobrine's dwelling. As long as Herobrine was gone, I didn't think it would be a problem, but if he was around, I was sure he would see me and interrupt my prank before it had a chance to get underway. Fortunately, fate was on my side. Just as I was about to attempt to mine underneath the wooden wall to infiltrate Herobrine's fortress, a door in the wall that I had not seen previously opened and Herobrine walked out. He was whistling to himself a happy little tune. He was skipping, in fact. I had no idea what he was up to. Probably going to pull a prank on some player. Maybe even turn someone else into a werewolf. I watched as he skipped away into the distance and over a nearby mountain range. I can't believe my luck, I said to myself. I walked up to the door that Herobrine had used and punched it. It opened without any difficulty. I walked inside and saw a large, stately, well-manicured lawn. Scattered throughout the large lawn were various statues, 90% of them of Herobrine himself. The other 10% of the statues were of various mobs and players. Couldn't figure out why he had chosen those, though clearly he had chosen the statues of himself because he was an egomaniacal narcissist. The lawn was so large it took me over a minute to walk to the walls of Herobrine's house. The house itself was surprisingly small. It was 2 stories tall and maybe 50 blocks by 50 blocks wide. It was made of cobblestone. I began to punch the wall and determined it was 3 blocks thick. Perfect. I mined away the outer 2 levels of block and inserted TNT into the middle of the wall before covering it with a layer of cobblestone. I went around the entire house, replacing enough of the wall so that when I ignited the TNT, it would blow the entire house to smithereens. The ultimate prank. Once I'd finished inserting the TNT, I prepared a redstone circuit to ignite TNT. I carefully camouflaged it and extended it all the way out into the forest where I could hide until Herobrine's return. Once the TNT and the ignition circuit was in place, I set up dozens of fireworks. The plan was to shoot the fireworks into the sky in order to draw an audience. Once the audience had gathered, I would blow up Herobrine's house. Once everything was in place, there was nothing left to do except wait. And wait I did. Herobrine did not return for nearly 3 days. The entire time I saw Trader Wilhelm up on the top of the nearby hill watching. I had to build myself an underground bunker to sleep in. I didn't want to risk building a small cabin and having Herobrine see it when he returned home. On the afternoon of the 3rd day of waiting, I heard Herobrine's door on his wooden fence open and heard him say, "Home sweet home. I love it so much." What a weirdo. I waited for a sufficient amount of time, hoping that he had entered his house. Obviously, now that I was outside of the walls surrounding his house, I couldn't be sure where he was. After about 15 minutes I ignited all the fireworks and shot them into the sky. Within a few minutes about a dozen players and several dozen villagers had come to find out who had launched so many fireworks into the air. And that's when Herobrine himself opened the door to his fortification. He looked around slightly confused and saw the mass of players and villagers gathered at a distance. He walked over to the group and asked, "What's going on here?" "We saw a bunch of fireworks in this direction," said one of the players. "Are you having a party?" Herobrine laughed. "If I were having a party, you would not be invited." "Well, did you shoot off the fireworks yourself?" said a nervous villager, probably not believing he was speaking to Herobrine. "Of course not. Why would I want to attract attention? And why would I want people like you showing up near my house?" I decided now was the perfect time to reveal myself. I punched open a brick of dirt above my underground chamber and popped out holding a redstone device to ignite the fuse. Herobrine recognized me immediately. "You? What are you doing here?" "This," I said as I pressed a button and ignited the fuse. The explosion should have been nearly instantaneous, but nothing happened. Herobrine smiled. It was a knowing and devilish smile. "What exactly are you doing again, Steve?" I flipped the lever back and forth. It should have worked. "I'm trying to prank you. It should have happened already." Herobrine smirked and put his index finger against his cheek. "Happened? What should have happened?" I pushed the lever several more times before I gave up. "Your house should have blown up. That's what." Herobrine chuckled. "Oh right. All that TNT in the walls and everything." I suddenly felt a chill. "You found it." Herobrine laughed again. "I saw you coming a few days ago. I knew you were up to something. I thought I'd let it play out. See what kind of conniving weasel you really were." "What are you going to do to me?" I asked, assuming some sort of torture or maybe even death was about to befall me. "I'm not going to do anything to your house. On the other hand, well, you'll see when you get home." And with those ominous words, Herobrine turned around, walked back through the door in his fence and disappeared. My house? Oh no. I turned and ran toward home. I saw Trader Wilhelm waving to me from the top of the hill. I ran even though the sun was about to set. I ran through the night, eating food as I ran and killing the creatures of the night who dared attack me. One which was particularly difficult, throwing multiple splash potions at me and wounding me until I only had 3 hearts of health. But in the end I vanquished her. Early the next morning, about an hour after sunrise, I arrived home. Well, I arrived. My home was gone, blown up. The only thing left was a crater at least 6 blocks deep where my house should have been. I hadn't gotten my revenge on Herobrine. Instead, he had humiliated me yet again, destroyed my house, and blew up all of my possessions and wealth. At least when I was a werewolf I couldn't remember the humiliations, but this one stung like being attacked by an entire beehive. Nevertheless, I was determined to find a way to get my revenge on Herobrine, one way or another. Chapter 7. I spent the next couple days rebuilding my house. I didn't spend too much time on the interior, but I wanted to get the walls and roof in place to keep out the monsters and the weather. I slightly modified the outline of my home's exterior. I had several ideas about some changes I had been wanting to make to my house for quite a while. If there was a silver lining in Herobrine's reversal of my attempt to humiliate him, it was that I could rebuild my house from scratch and implement my revised architectural ideas. I had to mine quite a bit of rock and obtain wood in various forms in order to complete the exterior walls, doors, and windows. At the end of 2 days of back and fist-breaking labor, I had a nice shell of the house. I didn't put any of the interior floors or rooms in the house because I wanted to get back to my plan to get revenge against Herobrine. Interior decorating could wait. Unfortunately, I had no idea what to do in order to get my revenge. I thought my prior plan had been perfect. Now that Herobrine knew I was aware of the location of his house, he would be on heightened alert for me. I would have to come up with a different and far more clever plan. About an hour later, I was in the yard surrounding my house, deciding whether or not to start a watermelon patch when Herobrine appeared. He walked up the path and opened the gate in the fence surrounding my house. I looked at him with bitterness. "What do you want?" Herobrine chuckled. "Just want to see how the rebuilding is going. Nice trick of mine, wasn't it? sending the explosion to your house from mine. I reached into my inventory and pulled out a pumpkin pie. I tossed it at Herobrine, hoping to hit him in the face. Instead, he ducked to the side and reached out his hand and caught the pie. Then he devoured it. Pretty good. Pumpkin pie. Maybe you should open a bakery in the village. You certainly aren't a warrior, that's for sure. Shut up, Herobrine. I already beat your stupid werewolf curse, and I'm going to humiliate you one way or another. Herobrine licked the last bits of the pumpkin pie off his fingers. I probably should just kill you right now, but I think it will be funny to watch you struggle for days and months and years trying to find a way to humiliate me, and always failing. It will be yet another humiliation I can heap upon you. I reached into my inventory and pulled out a trident. I tossed it at Herobrine, but he stepped to the side and watched it hit the ground. You're pathetic, he said before he turned and walked away, leaving me to wallow in my failure and shame. Chapter 8. 2 days had passed since Herobrine had come to my house to taunt me, and still I was no closer to a plan to humiliate him. I thought that maybe sitting outside and meditating would help. I put a wool blanket down on the grass and sat with my legs crossed and my hands on my knees. I then relaxed and started breathing rhythmically, hoping an idea would pop into my head. I must have sat there for at least 20 minutes with no good ideas when I heard the gate in my fence creak open. I opened my eyes and saw a witch and an illusioner walking into my yard. I stood up quickly and drew my diamond sword and put on a diamond helmet. I didn't have time to equip all of my armor, so I did the best I could. What do you want? The witch flicked the wart on her nose and said, Be calm, Steve. We are not here to attack you. We're here to offer you hope. Hope? What are you talking about? I said as I gripped my sword a little more tightly, wary of trickery. This time the illusioner responded, Is it not true that you wish to humiliate Herobrine? I nodded my head. I think just about everybody knows that by now. Stupid gossip. The illusioner nodded his head as well. Indeed. People talk about it. They talk of your failure. The talk of your inability to get revenge. Rub it in, why don't you? So, I said. The witch cackled. So we know how you can get revenge. Tell me now, I demanded, slashing my sword threateningly through the air. The illusioner and the witch looked suspiciously from side to side, checking for eavesdroppers. Do you think we can go inside your house to discuss this? Asked the illusioner. I was a little concerned about the request. If they got me inside an enclosed space and decided to attack me, they might have the upper hand. But I was intrigued. If they had wanted to attack me, I'm sure they would have already. Witches and illusioners are not known for their stealth. I shrugged. I guess so. You first. The witch and the illusioner walked in front of me and into my house. I followed them in and shut the door, but did not lock it. I stood with my back to the door, ready to run if I had to. Still held the sword in my hand. Talk. It's very simple, said the witch. We are part of the secret society of shapeshifters. What? Shapeshifters? I've never heard of such a thing. The illusioner laughed. What do you mean? You were a shapeshifter. You were werewolf. I nodded my head. Sure, I was cursed. But are you saying there are others? The witch continued. Yes, but we willingly become shapeshifters. Many of us can shift into an alternative mob form, like an ocelot or a llama or a horse. But there are a few who choose to transform into monsters. Indeed. It is quite striking, said the illusioner. So why tell me this? I said, bewildered. Because we want revenge on Herobrine too, said the illusioner. He stole the secret of shape shifting in order to use it to his own advantage. That's why he was able to turn you into a werewolf in the first place. Interesting. What are you offering me now? We can turn you back into a werewolf, but under your complete control. Then you can show up and scare Herobrine. He'll try to control you using his old techniques that he stole from us, but they won't work. I nodded my head. That's an interesting offer. What's the catch? The catch is, well, you'll just have to participate in our meetings once a month. We like to discuss our shape-shifting. It's fun. We have appetizers and drinks. It's a good social gathering. It's in the nearby swamp. Is that really all there is to it? I asked, not entirely sure I trusted these guys. At that moment the door burst open behind me, shoving my body forward. I turned around with my sword drawn and saw Ranger standing there. "Oh, there's more to it than that," said Ranger. The witch and the illusioner screamed at Ranger. "You've ruined us. You ruined our plan." The illusioner quickly cast a spell and suddenly he disappeared and was replaced by 4 copies of himself. The witch began tossing splash potions at us. Although the witch hit me with a potion of harming, I ran straight at her and began slashing at her with my sword and soon she was dead. Ranger was shooting arrows with his bow throughout my house, hoping to hit the invisible illusioner hiding amongst his clones. Ranger finally hit home with his 7th arrow. The illusioner's power waned, the false illusioner copies disappeared, and he was left on the ground with an arrow sticking out of his chest. I rushed over to him before he could die and said, "Why did you come to me? Why did you do this? Why does anyone do anything?" he said, beginning to cough his final death rattle. "For power, of course." And then he flashed red and disappeared in a puff of smoke. I looked over at Ranger and said, "Thank you. So what was the catch?" Ranger shook his head. "The catch is that once you shapeshift more than 3 times you become their slave for life. Worse even than what Herobrine did to you." I shook my head sadly. "Too bad. It would have been awesome to be a werewolf and scare Herobrine." "Maybe," said Ranger, "but I know something better. I didn't want to tell you about this earlier because you seem to have a good plan for revenge. But if you still want revenge so badly, I know someone who can help you get it. But you have to do everything he says and never give up." "Sounds good to me," I said with excitement. "Let's go." Ranger shook his head. "You have to promise me you will stick with it no matter what. The preparations could take a long time. For some it takes months or even years. Will you commit to that in the quest for your vengeance?" I became very serious. I centered my mind and my soul. I looked at Ranger and, with the most earnest and forthright voice I could muster, I said, "Of course I will. In that case, I will introduce you to Master Kenzo." Chapter 9. Ranger told me we would leave at first light the next morning. He told me to pack what I thought I would need for an extended stay away from my house. You know, a few changes of clothes, necessary weapons, and a bed to sleep in. If Master Kenzo accepts you as a student, he will provide you with food. "Did Master Kenzo train you?" I asked. Ranger shook his head. "I learned some skills from one of his students but never trained to the level expected by Master Kenzo." I began to feel a bit concerned about this Master Kenzo. "So is he going to teach me how to get revenge or what?" Ranger shrugged. "I know this. He is the greatest teacher of martial and weapons arts known in Minecraft. But he is very secretive. I assume you have never heard of him before." "You assume correctly. Indeed. In fact, I have heard that if he does not accept you as a student, he completely changes the location of his dwelling." I was astonished. "Really? Are you sure I should even try to become his student?" "How deep is your desire for vengeance?" asked Ranger. "As deep as the deepest ocean. It is the only thing I truly want," I said, meaning every single word. Ranger smiled. "In that case, Master Kenzo will take you. Now get some rest. I'll be back here tomorrow as soon as there's enough light in the sky to burn a zombie." Ranger returned as promised the next morning. We began heading toward the east. We passed through several biomes, including a jungle and a swamp. Then, we began climbing into a more mountainous region. Eventually we came to an area blanketed with snow. I put on a cloak over my armor. "I hope I don't have to practice outside. It's cold up here." Ranger shrugged. "I suggest you do whatever Master Kenzo tells you to do." Noted. We continued through the snow for another half an hour, dodging a couple of polar bears before arriving at an igloo. Ranger knocked on the door. After about 10 seconds the door opened inward but no one was standing there. Supposed it was probably on a redstone system with a lever allowing Master Kenzo to open his door no matter where he was inside his igloo. Ranger entered the igloo and I followed. Once we got inside, we were met by a short and elderly villager. His sharp, lithe movements, however, belonged to a younger man. He wore a black robe and no shoes. The first thing he said was, "Take off your shoes. I don't allow shoes inside my house." We did as we were told. The next thing he said was, "Sit down. We should drink tea." I looked at Ranger and raised an eyebrow. He squinted at me as if to say, "Shut up and do what he says." Master Kenzo prepared the tea and poured us each a small cup. He then sat down. Without saying a word and began to sip his tea. I assumed I should do the same. But, after 3 or 4 sips, which stretched over about 5 minutes, not a single word had been spoken. I became anxious. "Are you Master Kenzo?" I asked. Master Kenzo placed his teacup on the ground and looked at me and said, "Do not speak until the tea is gone." Oh brother. This was going to be a long training process. It took another 5 minutes before Master Kenzo finished his tea. I had finished several minutes earlier, gulping it rather than sipping it. Ranger on the other hand sipped slowly, matching his sips with those of Master Kenzo. When the tea was finished finally, Master Kenzo cleared away the cups and the teapot before returning to sit down. He looked at the two of us and then asked Ranger, "You trained with my student Franklin, did you not?" Ranger's eyes grew big with surprise. "Yes. How did you know?" "I can tell by the way you carried yourself. The mark of the teacher always is left on the student." Then he turned to me. "You, I can tell, have trained with no one. Is that why you're here?" I nodded my head. "I want to get revenge on Herobrine. Ranger told me that you might be able to help." Master Kenzo looked at Ranger with a strange look in his eyes and then looked back at me. "I do not teach people to get revenge. I only teach them to master themselves." "But," Ranger said. I saw Ranger put his hand to his forehead and massage it as though he had a strong headache. Master Kenzo cut me off. "I can teach you to master yourself in a weapon. What you do with that mastery is up to you. If you seek revenge, it will serve you for that purpose. If you seek contentment, it will serve you for that purpose. I teach perfection, not direction." "Weird. Okay then. Can you teach me how to better use my sword?" Master Kenzo shook his head. "The sword is not the right weapon for you. The right weapon for you is a bow." "But I hate ranged weapons," I whined. Master Kenzo shook his head. "That is only because you do not understand them. The bow is made for you." I looked at Ranger. "But I want to learn swordsmanship." Ranger shrugged his shoulders and said, "I'm not the master." I looked back at Master Kenzo and was about to plead my case when he put his hand up indicating that I should be quiet. "Steve, I will teach you the bow. And nothing else. If that is unacceptable to you, you should leave right now." I sat there thinking about his words. Ranger seemed convinced that this Master Kenzo character could teach me what I needed to know to get a satisfying revenge. But I didn't see how learning to shoot a bow and arrow would do that for me. Still, my desire for revenge was so powerful and all-consuming that I decided I would give it a try. "Okay then. I will submit to the training." Master Kenzo nodded his head. "I have only one requirement. You see the training through to the end. You cannot leave until I tell you that you may leave. I will allow you to leave when one of 2 conditions is satisfied. Either you have become a master, or you are an abject failure and can never learn." "Dang son." I nodded my head. "I understand." Master Kenzo smirked. "You think you understand, but you do not. Still, I can sense your resolve, and that is a good quality to have." He then looked over at Ranger. "Thank you for bringing this pupil to me. Please leave now." Ranger stood up, bowed slightly to Master Kenzo, and then walked out of the igloo without another word. Master Kenzo looked at me and said, "You will find a trapdoor under the carpet at the back of the room. Open the door and climb down the ladder. Have a dungeon down there with 2 empty holding cells. Choose one. It will be your home until I tell you otherwise." Chapter 10. For the first 6 days I was living in Master Kenzo's igloo. I did not speak with him. 3 times per day he lowered food down into the dungeon where I was living, if you could call it food. The meals were Spartan and not very tasty. Here's a sample menu: for breakfast, half a loaf of bread and a cup of tea; for lunch, 1 roasted chicken leg and a cup of tea; and for dinner, cup of mushroom stew and a glass of water. For the first 2 days I was in the dungeon, I was anxious and didn't really know what to do with myself. For the most part, I paced back and forth. But by the 3rd day, I assumed this isolation was part of the training. Instead of worrying about anything, I began to exercise. I did push-ups and sit-ups, jumping jacks, and various bodyweight exercises. I also stretched, trying to remain nimble so that I could fight mobs if any somehow infiltrated the igloo. By the 4th day, I began practicing with the bow I had brought with me in my inventory. Even though the dungeon was not very wide, I set up a small target and practiced shooting arrows at it. I was becoming quite proficient by the 6th day, almost always hitting directly in the center of the target. As I was practicing, Master Kenzo lowered lunch to me. Today lunch was a cup of tea and half a cold pork chop. There was also a note on the food tray tucked under the plate. The note said, "After you finish lunch, climb up the ladder, and we shall begin your training." I was very excited and ate lunch as quickly as I could, and then my bow slung across my back. I climbed up the ladder and entered the main living quarters of the igloo. Master Kenzo was sitting on a pillow with his legs crossed. When I stepped onto the floor and closed the trapdoor behind me, he shook his head and clucked his tongue. "You will not need that bow." "What are you talking about? Aren't you teaching me archery?" Master Kenzo nodded his head. "But with a far superior weapon. Get rid of that trash." I began to tuck the bow into my inventory when Master Kenzo interrupted me. "No, destroy it." I thought that was a strange request, but making another bow was not difficult, so I did as he asked. I punched the bow into a bunch of pieces and threw them outside of the igloo onto the snow. Master Kenzo smiled. "Come with me," said Master Kenzo. We left the igloo and walked for quite some time, at least an hour. By then, we had entered a jungle biome. I tried to ask him some questions about where we were going and what we were doing, but he refused to answer. Eventually, we arrived at a patch of bamboo. Master Kenzo removed a thin, curved, and very sharp sword from his inventory. I later learned it was called a katana, and slashed a stick of bamboo. He then cut it into a length almost exactly as long as I was tall. Then he strung some string between each end of the bow and handed it to me. "Here's your weapon." I held the bamboo bow in front of me and laughed. "This is a test of my gullibility, right? There is no such thing as a bamboo bow in Minecraft." Master Kenzo shook his head. "This is the most powerful and profound bow that exists. The bows that most of you players use are pathetic junk. Comparatively. I thought I'd try it out." I pulled an arrow from my inventory and knocked the arrow on the string. I pulled the arrow back and felt a surprising amount of strength in the bow. When I released the arrow, however, it almost went directly sideways. I looked at Master Kenzo with a scowl. "What a piece of junk. Doesn't even shoot straight. I have been hitting the bullseye over and over again with my other bow." Master Kenzo shook his head and took the bow from my hands. He knocked an arrow and then drew the bow almost to its full extent, making nearly a perfect circle with the bow in the string. He then looked over at me as he held the bow ready to shoot and said, "Pick a target." I looked around and saw a cocoa bean hanging from a tree in the distance. "How about that cocoa bean?" I said as I pointed. Master Kenzo nodded and turned toward the cocoa bean. Without even aiming, he released the arrow. It flew true through the air and penetrated the cocoa bean directly in the center. I was dumbfounded. "How? What? Why?" Master Kenzo handed the bow back to me. "You will learn. When the bow is drawn to its full potential, it creates a circle within which it encloses the all of Minecraft. That way you can channel all of the power of Minecraft into your shot. When you properly draw the bow, it will hit whatever you want it to hit." I had to try this. I quickly knocked an arrow and pulled the bow back as far as I could. I was surprised how difficult it was. Master Kenzo, as old and frail as he looked, was easily able to draw the bow and hold it. My hands began to shake after less than 2 seconds. I picked a nearby tree and let the arrow go. I missed it entirely. "Netherrack," I cursed. Master Kenzo shook his head. "You will not be shooting the bow for some time. We will now return to my igloo. You will take the bow down into the dungeon and contemplate it for a week. When that is done, you may emerge, and then we will move on to the second phase of the training." Chapter 11. I spent the next week contemplating the bow, or more properly staring at it. I really had no idea what this Master Kenzo was after. Basically, I had reached 2 conclusions. 1, he was really good at shooting a bamboo bow, and 2, he was crazy. I wasn't exactly sure what he meant by contemplate the bow. So I stared at it, flicked the string, and even took a few shots at the small target I had in my room. I was getting better and better at aiming the bow, but I was still not very good. I tried to pull the bow as wide as Master Kenzo to encompass the all of Minecraft within it, and use that to make the shots more powerful. But they never were. Finally, after a week of staring at a bamboo stick and some string and eating Really terrible food and nearly quitting and running away screaming, Master Kenzo told me to come up to the main living quarters and to bring the bow with me. When I reached his living quarters, he pointed to a cushion and told me to sit down. Today, I will teach you how to draw the bow spiritually. Dude, what? I noticed that when you tried to draw the bow while we were still in the jungle, your hands began to shake. This is natural. They shook because you were attempting to draw the bow with your strength and not with your spirit. I put up my hand and shook it. Sorry to interrupt, but if I can't use my hands to draw the bow, the string isn't going to move. Silence, said Master Kenzo, smacking his hand on the ground. Your hands are simply the vehicle for your spirit to draw the bow. Look at me. Look at how tiny and weak I look. And yet you saw what I did with the bow, did you not? I nodded my head. It was quite impressive, I must say. Indeed. And so you must learn how to do that yourself. It involves nothing more, nothing less than breathing and channeling the power of Minecraft. I rubbed my forehead. Master Kenzo, I'm sure you know what you're talking about. And I am sure that if I learned how to draw the bow, spiritually, I would be most appreciative. But I want to get my revenge on Herobrine. How is this going to help? Master Kenzo shook his head. You are very short-sighted. The arrows will provide you with the revenge you seek. They will give you your humiliation of Herobrine. But first you must learn how to trust them and to trust the bow. With your spirit powers. Have confidence in me. I had to say that I really didn't have much confidence in him. He sounded like a mentally deranged freak. But Ranger believed in him, so I decided to continue giving him a chance. Okay then, I sighed. What do I need to do? You must breathe in as you draw the bowstring. The breath is your spirit. The power of the breath will open the bow for you. Okay, that sounds a little kooky, but I guess it makes sense, I said. Stand up and go outside. Practice until I call you back. I stood up and walked outside the igloo. It was cold but not terrible. Practice breathing and drawing the bow for the next 3 hours. Did seem to make a difference. But my hand still trembled and the bowstring had begun to cut my fingers, drawing blood. And so the next 30 days passed like this, with me stretching the bow in the cold weather and trying to use my spirit to do it. I must have made some progress because Master Kenzo, after these 30 days, told me I was ready to practice shooting. In fact, I did feel better. I could hold the bow open at its widest point for 20 seconds now before my hands began to tremble. So I was making progress of some sort. In order to shoot the arrows, we walked down the mountain to a grassy meadow. Master Kenzo pointed to a small shrub and said, "That is your target. Draw the bow using your spirit and shoot the arrow with your spirit. If you do so, you will hit the target." I didn't hit the target the first day or the second or even the third. It was becoming increasingly frustrating. Master Kenzo kept saying the same thing over and over again. You are not putting your spirit into the arrow. Put your spirit in there. How do I do that? I said. I was so frustrated I wanted to break the bow over my knee. You will know it when you do it. Seriously? What does that even mean? And thus Master Kenzo responded with these maddening Zen-like statements, never giving me a straight answer but only forcing me to do things again and again. After 1 week had passed and I had not hit the target, Master Kenzo decided he needed to try a new tact. Listen to me, Steve. You are treating archery like it is a skill or a hobby to be learned. That is wrong. It is not a game. But it is a matter of life and death. What do you mean? Like the death of the thing I want to hit with my arrow? No. It is your life and death. If you cannot channel the spirit of the all of Minecraft into your body through your arms into the arrow and into its flight, then you are as good as dead, a lifeless husk. For some reason those words did it for me. Instead of drawing the bow, I felt the spirit of the all of Minecraft flowing into me, and like a circular wave, it coursed through my body and into my arm and then into the bowstring and then into the back of the arrow and then into the arrow and then through the air and then into the bush I'd been trying to hit for a week. I could do nothing other than gasp. Master Kenzo looked at me and smiled. We are done for the day. Let's go back to the igloo where you can sit in satisfaction of your success. And then, tomorrow you can do it again. And so we did it again and again. And though I did miss from time to time, it became easier and easier and soon I could hit the bush with each attempt. After watching me hit the bush target 10 times in a row, Master Kenzo said, It is clear that you have now mastered the drawing and aiming of the spirit of the all, but you must learn to aim it with exactness and precision if you are to get your vengeance upon Herobrine, if you are to truly humiliate him. What do you mean? I've been hitting dead center in the bush over and over again. Isn't that exact enough? You must learn to hit the smallest of specks from a great distance. You must learn to pierce a dust mote, and this will be the way in which you will get your revenge upon Herobrine. Why do I have a feeling that you know how I'm going to get my revenge even though I do not? Master Kenzo smirked. Because you are precisely correct. The day after he made that statement to me, we walked out in the snow and he quickly crafted a wall made of cobblestone. He then took a paintbrush and put dots no larger than the pointy tip of an arrow all over the wall, about 50 dots in all. He then returned to where I was standing flabbergasted at the knowledge of what he was about to ask me to do. Okay, Steve. You must hit each of these dots with your arrows. You must hit each dot precisely in the center. If you miss one, you will have to start over again. That's impossible. Even if I could hit a few of them, there's no way I'm going to get them all. Master Kenzo shook his head. Do you want me to show you how to do it? I knew that he could too. I shook my head. Never mind. I'll start now. Master Kenzo backed away and removed a pillow and a blanket from his inventory. He put the pillow down on the snow and the blanket on top of the pillow in order to insulate himself from the cold snow. Then he sat down and watched me fail, and fail again, fail over and over and over. Months went by and I kept failing. I thought about running away, but my desire for vengeance kept me there. And then one glorious day I did it. Hit each of the 50 dots dead center without missing any. But I only knew this because Master Kenzo told me it had happened. For some reason I had no memory of my success. You did it, Steve, said Master Kenzo joyously. I looked at him in a daze. I did. Master Kenzo smiled. Exactly. Once you completely let go and allowed the all of Minecraft to shoot your bow for you, you achieved perfection. Or rather, the all achieved perfection on your behalf. That was some kooky gobbledygook, but I was glad I had finally accomplished my goal. Let us return to the igloo now. Tomorrow you will try again. Once you can do it for 7 days in a row, you'll be ready to wreak your vengeance upon Herobrine. It took another month before I accomplished the feat 7 days in a row, but allowing the all to take over my actions became easier and easier. I wondered if I could do this when I was battling mobs. I wondered if that's why I couldn't remember anything I did while I was a werewolf. Had somehow the all entered my werewolf body? That raised a question in my mind, and I asked it of Master Kenzo one day over dinner. Is the all good or is it evil? Master Kenzo shook his head. The all is everything. The all serves the one who calls upon it. If one is evil, the all will serve evil. If one is good, the all will serve good. If one seeks vengeance, the all will serve vengeance. I nodded my head even though I didn't really understand. Now that I've hit the 50 dots for 7 days in a row, are you going to tell me how I should get revenge on Herobrine? Master Kenzo smiled. You can do whatever you want, but I will give you a suggestion. Chapter 12. Master Kenzo's suggestion was pure gold. Or maybe I should say pure diamonds. Or, from the rumor I've heard about changes coming to Minecraft, pure netherite. I stayed at Master Kenzo's igloo for another 2 weeks, practicing channeling the all to target the 50 dots and always doing it successfully. Master Kenzo had known I was ready much earlier than I finally convinced myself that I was ready. And so, I finally bid goodbye to Master Kenzo. As I was leaving, he told me, after you have achieved your vengeance, you must decide for what purpose you will use your mastery of the all, if you even decide to use it ever again. This is a decision you must make consciously. The ability to channel the all is far too powerful to not think things through. I nodded my head and bowed to Master Kenzo. Thank you for teaching me. Part of me doesn't even want to get revenge anymore. Your lessons have given me helpful way to think about my life in Minecraft. Master Kenzo bowed to me. This was the first time I had seen him bow. That is the true lesson you have learned. Now please leave me alone. And with that, Master Kenzo turned around and walked back into his igloo and slammed the door shut. I set off back toward home, but I was going to make a stop on the way at Herobrine's house. As I walked through the jungle, I did not attempt any stealth. My vengeance was going to be pure and obvious. I did not need to hide in order to exact it. I came to a small meadow and then across the way I saw the wall surrounding Herobrine's house. Its camouflage no longer worked on me. I could see it as though it were naked to the world. I stood there, my bow in one hand and a quiver of 50 arrows slung across my back. I knew Herobrine would be unable to resist coming out to taunt me. I had to do nothing but stand there. And soon, within just a few minutes, the door to his fortress opened. He stepped out and then closed the door behind him. He stood in front of it. Herobrine shouted at me with a blustering and boastful voice across the field. Come back to try it again? Fool! Rather than respond with words, I knocked an arrow and drew the bow. Pulled the string with my spirit, creating a home for the all between the string and the bamboo bough. Herobrine stood across the field and laughed at me. Seriously? You think you can hit me with that? You're such a pathetic baby. And then I loosed the arrow, and before the arrow even crossed the field I had loosed another 3. Before Herobrine could react, the arrows began to embed themselves, piercing through the clothes he was wearing like an outline around his body, before embedding into the wooden door behind him. Each arrow was aimed so precisely by the awl that they entered Herobrine's clothes but did not injure his skin. In less than 15 seconds I had shot all 50 arrows and effectively nailed him against the wall of his own fortress. What have you done? How can you do this to me? I am Herobrine. Now, with Herobrine completely pinned against the wall, I slowly crossed the meadow. I walked up to him and put my face less than a block away from his face. I have now humiliated you, and we are even. Don't ever come after me again, for my aim is true, as you now know. If you challenge me again, my next arrow will pierce your heart. And then, as a look of utter terror crossed Herobrine's face, I turned my back upon him and walked away. My vengeance was complete.